Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Amanda.
And we're your hosts.
We're a traveling couple and digital nomads taking you on our adventures as we explore locations, destinations, and careers.
Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the World Wanderers podcast. We are super excited that you're joining us for today's episode of the show. And we know you have lots of podcast options to choose from, so we're super grateful that you're choosing to listen to the World Wanderers and join us for this particular episode. This week on the podcast, we are really excited to be joined by Neel Parekh. He is the founder and CEO of MaidThis and MaidThis franchise, which helps homeowners and short-term rental hosts, think Airbnb, VRBO, etc., with their cleaning needs. And Neel's business has generated millions in revenue while having a fully remote team, and now he's on a mission to help others achieve the same. He's been a quote-unquote digital nomad for almost 5 years and is still vagabonding around the world, at least pre-COVID, and even, in the last couple of months, he's been traveling as well. So he'll tell us a little bit about that trip also. And we're really excited to dive into this episode because Neel shares what inspired him to create MaidThis, the process of building and scaling a business and how he was able to do it so quickly, how to balance work and travel when running a local business remotely, and much more. So much good stuff in this episode. And just a quick reminder, if you are interested in working and traveling, in location independent lifestyle, in digital nomad life, we have lots of episodes over at the World Wanderers Insider that talk about the how-to with this. So how to actually find your remote job, how to actually, get planning and find Airbnbs or find places to stay and get on the road, how to balance work and travel, and so much more. So if you want access to that, head on over to patreon.com/The World Wanderers. We'd love to see you there. Otherwise, let's get into this episode. Here is Neel. Welcome to the podcast today, Neel. We're really excited to have you here with us today.
Thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really fun conversation. I'm super, super interested in your business and everything that you've done with work and travel. And maybe a good place to start is just, can you share where you're joining us from right now?
Sure. So that one's not nearly as exciting because I just got back to Los Angeles, where I'm originally from, yesterday. But before that, I was in traveling around quite a bit. So I came from Israel, where I was for about a month, and was over in Africa before that. But yeah, currently back in Los Angeles and on jet lag. So I woke up at 2:30 a.m. today. So that was nice.
Oh my gosh, that's so brutal. It's like the downside of travel, right? Is like coming back home and then just like feeling like absolute crap for a couple days to a week.
Yeah, I'm normally a late riser, although I do like getting up early. So in some ways, it's kind of nice because I get up before everyone. And I'm like, oh, is this what it's like to be an early bird? This is kind of nice, actually. So jet lag and me are friends.
I love it. That's amazing. And so let's back up a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about your travel story, when you first fell in love with travel, all of that good stuff?
Absolutely. So I've been living a nomad type of life for about 7 years now. So I originally started in 2015. Prior to that, I worked in finance for a few years. I worked in private equity, investing in tech companies. And while I was there, I started a side hustle, which I'm sure we'll talk about soon. And after that, couple years after that, I quit my job, booked a one-way flight to Colombia in September 2015, and I've been mostly traveling since then. So around 45 to 50 countries now, kind of bouncing around, some places longer, some places shorter. But yeah, that's been the journey.
Awesome. And for you, was it something you were growing up, were always thinking like, oh, I'd love to get out and explore the world? Or what was kind of the spark that led you to make that decision?
I was recently talking about this with someone to kind of backtrack where it came from. And I think it's one of those things which is just a random series of events which leads to it. Because growing up, we didn't travel internationally too much. My parents were immigrants, didn't have much money. So a treat would be getting soda at the restaurant, right? So going internationally and traveling was out of the question. So it didn't really come from childhood, but I remember when I was in college, my sister said, hey, her friend had a great time doing a study abroad program in Barcelona. And in my mind, I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, maybe I'll do a study abroad thing as well. So I ended up doing a study abroad program in Rome, Italy. That kind of kicked it off. I was backpacking around Europe for a while, staying at hostels, loved it. So ever since that moment, I thought, hey, at some point, I'm going to take a year off and go travel, right? I'll do it after working for 2-3 years. And around like 4 years is how long I spent actually working, but the whole time I was kind of planning my escape of just leaving and traveling for about a year. And I thought it'd just be a year, right? And then as things go, you get comfortable in it, things keep going and going and going, and 7 years later, here I am. But that's kind of the evolution and journey. It's just a small inception of something my sister said, which led me down the path.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear about. And I just find it fascinating, like just depending on, the background and the differences in backgrounds, how, we can all find our way to this thing that we're sort of almost like destined to do, it kind of feels like. So I appreciate you sharing that. And then, so you're working full time. What kind of inspires you to start a side hustle? Because I'm imagining like you must have been pretty busy with your full-time work, and don't want to make assumptions, but private equity, like probably making like a decent salary, no?
It was decent salary, good bonuses, but some weeks were like 90, 100-hour weeks. Like it gets kind of nutty in finance. So I always knew like I wasn't really made for finance or the corporate role. Even my boss said, "Yeah, you're not a finance guy." And it's like, "Yeah, no, I was doing well over there, but it just wasn't really suiting my personality." So there's a couple motivations. Number one, I did want to quit and travel at some point. So I knew I wanted to do that, and I wanted some sort of income coming in at the time. I always wanted to eventually get into small business. My parents had video rental stores. Remember like the old school Blockbusters?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're old enough for that.
Yeah. So my parents had a couple of them, private ones called Video Town. So I grew up around small business in general. And around the 2010s is when I started this. And they still had the video rental store then. So as you can imagine, it wasn't really doing that well financially. Netflix was around, and streaming apps were starting to get started in 2013. So part of the reason for me starting a side business is that I wanted to help provide for them financially as well, and have it something where they could do from home as they were getting a little bit older. So traveling plus taking care of elderly parents were more of the motivation for starting something. And from that, I was able to find a lot of joy in myself and being able to travel due to what I started. So it kind of helped everyone out.
Awesome. Yeah. And then what was that process like? Like, how did you find something and kind of find an angle that you wanted to pursue?
Ryan, you ever been on Reddit?
I have been on Reddit a few times.
Cool. So I was like,
times, please.
Ryan, what's your favorite subreddit?
I don't know. I feel like I was a big, like on a bunch of cryptocurrency ones quite a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been kind of all over the place.
I love how Amanda just called you out relentlessly. That was great.
So fun fact about Ryan, just really quickly, because this interview is totally about you, Neel, but Ryan's like one of those people who's really good at getting interested into something and then goes like really deep with it and then can give you like 100 facts about it. And then like 2 weeks later, he's like on to the next thing. So I'm sure he's like been down a million subreddit rabbit holes.
Absolutely. Especially like in the cryptoverse, that's like an endless pit of rabbit holes that I think everyone went through last year. So I feel you on that one. So anyways, back to Reddit. So I was working in private equity, trying to find a side hustle. And like, we all see the photo of the guy on the internet working on a laptop, and you go online and say, how do I work and travel? And all these blogs come up. And this was back when like ebooks were big, and, drop shipping and micro blogs and things like that. So that's kind of what I thought you would need to do to be a digital nomad, is start an e-commerce website, do a microblog. So I think my first attempt was like a pet hair vacuum blog or something like that for an affiliate link. I tried e-commerce, tried drop shipping, everything kind of flopped. So finally I was on Reddit, and I was on the subreddit Entrepreneur just to get some inspiration. I saw a post of a guy who started a cleaning company, a local cleaning company, and he actually posted the steps on it. So I thought, what the heck, let me give this a shot as well. Everything else I'm doing, I'm trying a bunch of things out. Let me do this as well. And it started working, and it started making money from it. I remember getting our first sale, and like I ran outside and started dancing in front of the building because I was so stoked on it that I actually made money online. And that's kind of what started. I started kind of growing from there. And what I realized in hindsight was that the reason it worked is because local competition kind of sucks, right? When you're doing e-commerce, digital marketing, things like that, you're competing against the entire world. With a local cleaning company, you're competing against just your local market. Now, I had a different angle to it because I knew I wanted to quit and travel. So as I was building it, I kept thinking in my mind, okay, well, this is just something nice for my parents to have because it's local. I can't do this while traveling. I really need to do digital marketing, e-commerce, whatever, to actually be able to travel. And then I kind of had an epiphany one time where I thought, hey, why can't I do this remotely? Right? It is a local business, but in reality, cleaners go straight from their home to the job site. Why do I actually need to be here, even though it's local? So with that thought, I built the systems in a way where everything can be managed remotely. And so we were scaling the business and started getting involved in the Airbnb niche. That's kind of when Airbnb started to come about a lot more, and people were calling and saying, "Hey, can you do my Airbnb turnovers?" which is much higher volume. So shifted gears, started specializing in Airbnb cleaning, and I think we got to around maybe 30,000 a month in revenue by the time I quit my job, and then the business doubled the first year of me traveling, and kind of kept growing from there. So that was the story and where the idea came from.
Awesome. Yeah. And then at what point in that were you kind of starting to think like, okay, like I'm ready to make this jump. I want to, go fully nomadic.
Yeah, I set a income level of like, hey, I want to have this amount of money coming in, and it wasn't replacing my private equity income. It was just when I travel, I want to make sure I think I'd set like, hey, $2,000 to $3,000 a month coming in to make sure I could cover all my travel expenses, not figure it out from there. So really the goal was based off of profitability and consistent profitability. I probably could have quit earlier than I did. But I'm relatively risk averse. I wanted that kind of cushion of savings from my job as well. So I kept on a little bit longer as well. But yeah, it was mostly based around the number. What's that money milestone number where once I hit this, I could quit and start traveling.
Awesome. Yeah. I think it's really responsible and also really cool that you were able to do it and make it happen so quickly. Something I wanted to follow up on, I think a lot of people are probably listening to this and maybe in that similar spot you were of like, I think of all the things like approaching this idea of like, hey, I'm going to build something, but I got to do it in a way that's not really going to require me to do much work. And so like, I've tried e-commerce, I've tried all these other things and I feel like nothing's sticking. Like, how do you kind of open your mind to like other possibilities? And then think of new ways to make sure you're still able to like live and travel and have that kind of freedom that you want.
Yeah, I love the question. I think a lot of people fall into analysis paralysis. And I did this too. You read a lot of blogs, you buy courses, you do stuff, and you feel like you're being very productive, but in reality, you're not really being productive. You're just absorbing a lot of information. The key is actually just doing something. Now, the question is, what do I do? How do I achieve financial and location freedom? For me, I kind of found out in hindsight that you might as well do something which is already making money. Right? Like there's no point of reinventing the wheel. I was trying to do a lot of things, which is like, hey, no one's done this before. Let me try this out. It's just playing on hard mode. You don't really need to do that. There's a lot of ways to make money which exist already. Just kind of copy that framework. And for me, from a completely biased perspective, I found local business to be a much easier way to start making money immediately. Not freelancing, not e-commerce, not digital marketing, local business. Why? Because the competition sucks and you're only competing against that market. That's it. And the reality is, if you want to achieve financial freedom and actually start a location independent lifestyle, be a nomad, you don't need that much money. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to make millions of dollars initially. You just need to make enough for you to get going. And you can achieve that with a local business, right? The scalability might be limited compared to, let's say, a massive e-commerce company, but you're not trying to build $1 million profit business right now. You're just trying to build a few thousand to start being able to travel. So I guess a couple of things I would say is, don't fall into analysis paralysis, and also pick a niche which is already proven out where there's a plan for success. And hopefully that niche is one where the competition's not crazy sophisticated. It's not a huge uphill battle to actually be profitable.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I feel like that's really awesome to hear because I think so many people, want to be able to live nomadically. They want to be able to work and travel. And I think they think immediately like you need to have an online job or like something that's like online entirely. Mm-hmm. And obviously what you do with MaidThis is online, like the work you actually do, but it's started as a local business and still is a business that actually like operates in person. And I think that that's like a little bit of like thinking outside the box. So I think that that's really cool to hear. And then I'm curious with that, like when you first started, was there quite a bit of hands-on work? Like, was it the type of thing where when you started, you definitely needed to be there, doing the work, that type of thing, and then you were able to go kind of location independent after that? Or was it always something where you were remote, but the business operated in person?
Yeah, it's a good question. It was, there's different levels to it, and it depends on like the speed of technology and adoption. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But when I first started, the biggest thing I was there for is for like the group interviews. We'd interview cleaners at a local Starbucks and have them show up and interview them, make sure they show up, explain everything to them, and kind of go from there. Eventually, I was able to hire someone who could do those interviews for me, right? So at that point, I was technically remote. What's actually happened since then is COVID happened. right? And what happens with COVID is everyone starts to use Zoom. All of these cleaners who are very untech savvy all of a sudden know how to use Zoom. So currently, we no longer need to do group in-person interviews at all. That was something that we were doing before and that I hired out for. So initially, me doing it, finally hired out for it, went nomadic. But now, even the person I hired it out for is just doing kind of office work. It doesn't even need to actually be there at all. And we have franchise operations now. So we're selling MaidThis franchises across the nation for other people who want to be pretty much copy the business model and be nomadic as well. And my franchisees don't need to actually be there at all. Most of them work full-time jobs. So we've set it up in a way where they pretty much copy what we're doing, have everything on Zoom for interviews, and kind of scale from there. And so everything now is 100% remote. But when I started in it originally, I didn't really know how to do that. So I definitely was doing things in person.
Yeah. And then how quickly did you go from just doing it in LA to actually doing it in other cities?
So we for like home office locations, I'll call it, we are currently in Los Angeles, which is the biggest location, and San Francisco. I think San Francisco I started MaidThis in 2013. San Francisco probably launched in like 2016, 2017. And we started selling franchises in 2020. So right when COVID was starting. So now we're in 7 total locations around the nation. Mostly just expanding via the franchise models. So 2 company-owned locations, which I own, and then the franchises own the rest. So that was kind of the progression there.
Nice. And then, yeah, I'd love to hear just kind of about how you think and kind of your journey in terms of how you evolved thinking about the business, because it sounds like your kind of motivation initially was like, oh, I just want to create something that allow me to kind of live the lifestyle I want, to travel, to be a nomad. And then kind of that ambition continues to grow. Was this something you kind of started out with like, hey, I'm like kind of thinking, I just want something that'll allow me to travel. I'll be happy. But like in the back of my head, I want to do something bigger. Or how did that evolve?
Man, that's a very insightful question. I love that. It's and it was around like maybe 2017, 2018 where I was thinking what I actually want to do with this thing. Because at the beginning, when you're getting started in entrepreneurship, you are kind of getting either away from a pain or towards a want. Getting away from pain meaning like I don't like the job I'm at. I want to go travel. Like I'm trying to change something in my life. You're getting away from a pain. For me, the pain was, hey, I don't want to work in a job and I want to make sure my parents are financially secure, right? That's your motivation. Now, the question is, what happens when that motivation is resolved? Then what do you want to do, right? Because now let's say the pain's gone away, you make it a few $1,000s a month, you're nomadic, awesome. What is your motivation for the next step? And that's when you're kind of in a place where you can make a decision of what you actually want to do. Do you just want to keep coasting, make a few thousand a month and have that be your lifestyle? That's fine. You could totally do that. And now you're in a position to be able to make that decision because you have total freedom of that. So for me, I was in that position and I thought, what do I actually want to do? Do I want to keep growing? And I realized I was having fun doing it. Right? I just like business building. And I think there's a lot of things involved with growth and personal growth that go hand in hand with entrepreneurship. Your business can only grow as fast as you yourself level up, is what I found. And I liked just that feeling of personally leveling up. So it kind of went hand in hand. The more I grew my business, the more I personally leveled up, and I liked it. So I kind of kept it going from there. And my thinking has evolved. I kind of think about it as a game, right? Of, hey, am I winning the game of business? It's a fun game to play. The output of it is money. But that's not the pure motivation. I just like the building aspect of it. I don't think that's for everyone, though. I think a lot of people to get into entrepreneurship want to do that and like building, and a lot of people want to get into it for making a few $1,000s and they're living a happy life traveling the world. Both are fine, right? And I think a lot of the issues that happen is people get sold hustle culture, where maybe there are people who really just want to live a nomadic lifestyle, travel for a while, and they're happy with that, but then they see the Gary V's of the world and all these people online on Instagram, Twitter saying, hey, you got to hustle, you got to make a ton of money. They think, oh, wait, should I be doing that as well? And then they start getting into that trap. So I think a lot of the answers will come from getting to a place where you've already solved the pain that you're kind of going away from, and then really sitting back and thinking about what do I actually want to do, and just trying things out and seeing if that's really in alignment or not. So Ryan, that was a long-winded answer, but I hope that solved or answered what your question was.
No, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's cool to hear kind of how the thought evolves and definitely can relate to that. Yeah, I'd love to talk a bit about kind of the travel experiences as those get started. And especially like, I think everyone who kind of gets into this does so a little bit idealistic in terms of like, oh, this is going to be best of both worlds. I'm traveling and I'm making money, and then you have to figure out how to balance it. But kind of talk us through like how you started that nomad adventure. Where was the first place you went? What was your plan like?
Yeah, so I started booked a one-way flight to Colombia. So I went to Medellin initially. Have you guys been there?
We have, yeah, it's been a long time, and we actually had flights to go back in, I think it was March 20th of 2020.
Yeah, something like that. So obviously we didn't get to go since the world shut down.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're planning to go back early 2023, I think, with the baby.
Amazing. Good thing you didn't go. I heard they got locked down like crazy over there too. So good call. But that was the first place I went, and just because I heard great things about it, and I wanted to backpack around South America. So I went there, and I was in Colombia for about 3 weeks. And when I first started, I was working out of hostels, just traditional backpacker, with kind of a side hustle job. So I'd go a little bit slower than normal, but was still working out of hostels, doing 3 weeks in each country and moving relatively fast, right? Hostel hopping, going through buses, planes, sightseeing, things like that. And as my travels have evolved over the years, I've kind of slowed down, kind of more involved in online communities of other people who are also nomadic and also want to build bigger businesses. And they kind of are more posted up in different cities. I'm sure you guys are very tied into that community as well. There's a whole community of people who aren't doing this for the backpacker lifestyle. They're doing it for like a nomadic lifestyle. And that's a different type of mentality compared to a backpacker. But initially, I'd say I started as a backpacker and kind of slowed down from there.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. I'm curious, like how you balanced and managed like the working and traveling with the backpacker lifestyle, because we've done the backpacker lifestyle and we did it in South America as well. So I'm sure we went to lots of the same places on the Gringo Trail. But I feel like one of the things with backpacker lifestyle is like, you're sleeping in hostels often, so you're in shared dorms. You're not always getting like the most or the best sleep. Maybe going out at night, going to happy hours and dinners with people in your hostel, and then spending the days kind of, doing activities and sightseeing, which if you only have like a couple days to a week in a place, I feel like our time was so jam-packed when we were doing that. And one of the things I like about our lifestyle now is that we go so much slower. Maybe just me getting older as well. So anyways, I'm curious how you balanced like, hey, I'm a backpacker, I'm kind of go, with like, hey, I'm also running a business. I need to make sure that I spend time with that.
Yeah. Honestly, when I was backpacking, I probably wasn't working as much. And luckily the business was smaller, so it didn't really demand as much of me at the time. I would say, yeah, we probably would have grown faster if I was just hunkered down on working instead of backpacking. But that's not the point, right? The point is to actually experience life. So I think it's one of those things where I didn't work as much as probably like a part-time job while I was backpacking. And then I kind of just outgrew the backpacker lifestyle and wanted to focus more on the business. And that's when I transitioned naturally to the next evolution. So where I went from backpacking was, Airbnbs, co-living places, which are great. That's kind of like a hostel / Airbnb. So spent maybe a year going through co-living places, then just kind of transitioned to having my own more permanent, semi-permanent residence in any different place I was going to. But yeah, backpacking, it's really tough to do. But I feel like a lot of the people who want to get into travel, you start by being a backpacker and you kind of get it out of your system. And I'm sure both of us have met people who are backpacking for like a year, 2 years, but that's very few in between. Most people do it for a handful of months, maybe a year tops, and then say, all right, time to transition to something else. That's when I think more stability happens. How was your guys' experience with backpacking and transitioning?
Yeah, we did kind of two big trips. So right after we graduated university, we did kind of like super rapid. We did 3 months in Europe and then Southeast Asia and then Australia and New Zealand, all within 6 months, which was a real blast. And that was like, we were super young and we're kind of partying and enjoying ourselves. And then a couple of years later, we did South America. And I think that was when we were starting to feel that like, we're doing this and like, we want to have some more sense of meaning and personal growth coming out of it. And so we kind of started to slow down there. And then when we started working and traveling, we were both freelancing like very early on career-wise, in that regard. And so I think we were trying to do both things too much. So we were in Southeast Asia moving around and we realized like we were just stressing ourselves out, not really enjoying it as much. And so that kind of led us eventually to look for places where we could be for a few months at a time and kind of take bites out and have travel hubs. But that was our evolution over time.
Yeah, it seems like kind of the evolution of most people who are in like the nomadic lifestyle is you just slow down and get more hubs and kind of continue down the same circle, which is what a lot of people do. And it could be a matter of age. I don't really know. But you definitely outgrow the backpacker lifestyle.
Yeah, I think like you just, once you've been to enough places, you kind of realize like, okay, well, counting all the places isn't the point. And you're kind of like, I just want to experience things a little bit more.
Yeah, and I remember having that epiphany. I was in Malta and I was walking around. I remember thinking, I am literally doing the same thing in a different place, right? It's almost like chasing that high, chasing the dragon of like, cool, let me go to a new location. And then you realize like this is technically a new place, but it feels the same. And you kind of want something different or more groundedness as opposed to bouncing around a lot. So definitely had that epiphany.
Yeah, I remember, I think for both of us, this was kind of maybe not necessarily a pivotal moment, but a moment that it kind of just made a few things click for us. We went to a travel meetup at one point with a couple of people, and it was just kind of really realizing like these are people who are really chase the dragon when it comes to, constructing life and identity purely around travel without having any kind of further dimensions to it. And it's like the conversation is just that like one-upping, like, oh, like you've been here, but you haven't been here. Like you haven't been to Eritrea or Moldova. And just kind of one of those weird conversations where you're like, okay, these are people who have really gone down this path. And it's like, we need to develop a more kind of holistic sense of self beyond just travel.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think COVID caused a big reckoning for a lot of people in the travel community because of that, and myself included, right? Part of your identity is wrapped around travel. And all of a sudden, if you can't do that, then you feel like, what is my identity? I'm not a traveler right now. And it caused a lot of people to kind of reevaluate what they're doing. So even now, I'd probably say I don't consider myself a digital nomad anymore. I just don't like the term. I don't like identifying myself with travel, right? Which is kind of more of a hobby as a central identity. It's like on my Twitter profile, it says recovering digital nomad. That's literally what my profile says. I kind of just think about it as I still travel as much as I did before. I just don't want to call that an identity, if that makes sense at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that that's something that we can probably both relate to. Like at this point, we haven't been to like a new country since like the end of 2019. And, obviously people are traveling and stuff, but for us, part of our journey was like, I got pregnant in the spring of 2021, and now we have a pretty young baby, and the world is still a little chaotic when it comes to travel, and we're pretty new with her. So it's like, we don't want to take her across the world where there's, maybe shutdowns happening again, or like a lot of rules and restrictions and quarantines to get into places, just because, we need it to be a little bit easy for us right now because we're kind of in this new sort of travel experience. But I was literally thinking about this the other day. I still have digital nomad on my personal Instagram, and I was like, but am I though? I'm kind of just an expat living in Mexico at this point. And we are traveling, we've been to the US, we've been to Canada, we've traveled a lot in Mexico over the last couple of years, but it feels like there's been a shift, for us, similar to what you were talking about.
By the way, you guys have given me hope by example that even though I have a family, which I hopefully will have someday, you could still live internationally, still live a nomadic type of lifestyle. I think that's awesome. You guys are doing that.
Yeah, and it definitely worked out well, kind of building that expectation from our family so that when the first grandkid pops up, there isn't like the massive like, oh my God, you need to be back home like all the time.
They're like, where are you birthing this baby? We're like, yeah, we're going to Mexico to do that.
Right. Like, and then people would say, hey, it's like, especially in the US, like, oh, it's so much better in the US. Yeah, it costs like 40 grand to birth a baby in the US. So it's just unnecessary.
Yeah. Yeah. And surprisingly, people have been doing it outside of Canada and the US, and actually doing it quite well if you look at the population numbers.
True. Very true.
Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your travels over time. Like I know you mentioned having that one-way trip to Colombia to start. Was that like the start of a bigger trip? Did you other places? Kind of over the years, what have been like the big places you found and really loved and the highlights?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's kind of around community, right? So after the South America trip, I did a lot of Central America, and one potential downside of having a local business is you're working local hours. So I was working Los Angeles hours, meaning going to Asia was out of the question at the beginning until I got it fully systemized. So I was mostly sticking to kind of Central America, South America. So after South America, I headed up to Central America, Guatemala, Nicaragua, things like that. Hopped over to Europe, and in Europe, in certain cities, there's a good nomadic base. So it started to get more tied into like Dynamite Circle Group, which is a location independent entrepreneur group, meeting different people who are doing that. And these people are staying in places longer, right? They'll get a lease for like 2, 3 months at least in a single city before moving on. So I started to really enjoying the feeling of just staying in one place more, actually having a friends group that weren't just backpackers or travelers. So I ended up in Budapest for 2, 3 months as the next trip. Loved it. I've been to Budapest for like 3 to 4 times since then and made good friends who still live there. So I was bouncing around a lot of Europe at that point. Eventually made it over to Asia. So posted up in Thailand, where we know there's a huge community of nomads, travelers, location independent entrepreneurs. So I posted up in Thailand 2018, 2019 for like the winter time. So maybe 3 months in each year. And just recently is when I finally made my way longer term through Africa. So I actually just got back. I was doing a motorcycle trip through East Africa. So went through Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda, then flew down to South Africa, met my team members who live in South Africa, and then kind of headed out from there over to Israel. So kind of bouncing around in a lot of different places, but I'd say from when I was like mostly a nomadic, it was mostly Central America, South America, Europe, and a little bit of Asia.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm curious, so you were kind of, fully location independent, not having much of a home. Is that correct? Or did you always keep a home base?
I did not keep a home base. When I'd come back to LA, I'd go stay mostly at my parents' place. So they were around LA.
Okay, cool. And so at what point did you decide like, hey, I like this lifestyle, but I want to have more of a home base?
I was feeling it probably a year before COVID, where I don't know. Yeah, I think it just became so normal to travel the way I was that I didn't change it up, even though I felt something kind of shifted and was a little bit off. And then when COVID hit, and of course I came back and kind of reevaluated stuff, I realized that no, I do want a home base and I want to travel from my home base. And I don't care if I'm spending extra money, which is quote unquote dead money. That's just what I value a little bit more at the time. So before that, I was doing like longer term Airbnbs, maybe 3 months at a time. But that's a little bit different. You feel like it's home, but it's not really home for you. So the shift only happened when I was forced to because of COVID.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's
How
kind
about
of
you
funny
guys?
because we were what were we doing? So we were pretty much nomadic until I guess the fall of 2019. We were kind of feeling like the call to maybe settle a little bit. So we went to Panama and we actually signed a 1-year lease on an apartment. And the pandemic hit it was like we were like, oh my God, are we actually doing this? They've got like a deposit, all these things. And the pandemic hit about pretty close to 6 months into that. And we really went back and forth, like, do we stay here or do we go back to Canada? And it was just really early days. And one of the things that kind of influenced our decision was the Panamanian government said we're prioritizing hospital beds to Panamanians, which have no issues with that at all. But as a non-Panamanian and not really knowing much about the virus at that point, we were like, no, we got to go back to Canada. We should be closer to our families and our friends, just a better support network. We understand the healthcare system a little bit better. And obviously, if we're not prioritized here, then like we need to be somewhere just in case we do get sick. So we ended up going back to Canada and being there for 8 months and then pretty much moved to Mexico full time October 2020.
Okay. So not too much after that, actually, October 2020.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were in Canada from like March 2020 to October 2020, and Canada was getting cold and it seemed like everything was headed towards another lockdown, which did end up happening. And we were just like, we don't really want to spend winter indoors with like everything shut down again. Yeah. And Mexico's been like open, land of the free since like June of 2020, pretty much since. So we decided to come down here and we'd already been spending like half the year in Mexico anyway. So we were pretty familiar with the country and then ended up getting residency. And yeah, we've pretty well been here ever since outside of, a couple trips to the US and a couple trips to Canada.
I can't tell if Mexico's underrated, properly rated, or overrated. I love it. And I think a lot of people who move there from US and Canada and they love it as well. But I feel like I don't know too many people who settle there versus like Europe, for example. But I feel like there's just so much to offer in Mexico, and more people should be moving there for the type of lifestyle they want.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of people who have been moving here, I think, with the pandemic, but
Hmm.
the world is so big, right? And there's so many different places and things that draw people in. And I mean, one of the great things about Mexico is that Mexico is a huge country. So there's a lot to explore within the country, which I think was really attractive for us during kind of the heart of the pandemic. Like once it was kind of determined that, if you're young, you're healthy, it's like, pretty well safe to travel, but borders were still closed and there was lots of restrictions. But I mean, with Europe, you kind of get this, like, you can travel, you live in Budapest and you're like, oh, I'm going to like France for a long weekend, or I'm going to the Greek islands for a week. And I feel like there's a really kind of cool romantic thing about that as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. By the way, quick funny story about Panama. Since you guys were there during the pandemic, I was going to go there as well. I signed up for a desert island survival trip on March 2020. So it's like 10 days on the desert island off of Panama, which I ended up doing later. But right before the trip was about to happen, I said, "Hey, I'm going to go home. I got sick." So I decided to go back to Los Angeles. And the group who actually went to the island, right when they got off, they're like, "Hey, all the borders are shutting down in like 12 hours. So you guys really got to get out of here." And they're like, "Hey, okay, this is a joke, right? We were just been on the island for 10 days." Like, no, no, no. There's this thing called COVID. You guys really got to go right now. So I kept imagining like, wow, what if I was actually on that island during COVID and just got stuck there? It's just a funny thing which would have happened.
Yeah, yeah, that is crazy to imagine the experience. I remember watching early on, there was like all these clips from like Big Brother or something where they're like had been in there for quite a while, so they didn't even know like anything about it. And they're like, hey, guess what? This is happening. Like you're gonna all have to leave.
Yeah.
But I know in Panama, like it was something where we booked a flight. We were kind of waiting and watching things, watching a lot of like press conferences for the first time in life. And then they were like, okay, yeah, we're going to start to shut things down. And then it just progressed so quickly where we booked a flight on a Saturday. And then even it was like the Monday, we're like, no, we need to get out of here sooner than that. And so we ended up leaving on Wednesday. By the end of the weekend, they'd fully shut down the international airport.
Yeah.
Had really, really hardcore lockdowns where you were only allowed to go out like certain hours based off your gender and your passport number. So
Yeah.
Not the ideal place to be for quite a long time.
Yeah, definitely. It seems since then, you guys are maybe closer to the ground, so maybe you'll know, but I'm wondering if the travel community has come back equally strong, stronger, or less strong since then, as we go into like 2020, or 2022, 2023. What have you guys seen for the nomad community since then?
Do you mean just kind of in general?
Yeah, like are people still nomading a lot just as they were in 2019, or has that shifted?
Yeah, I would say it's probably back and even bigger would be my sense of it right now. I know Mexico has last year was the biggest tourism year in like the history of Mexico.
Oh, wow.
It seems like it's like really developed, certain places, like some places I remember talking to someone from Costa Rica who was saying like, oh, it still really isn't back here. But then just knowing so many people who are working remotely now who weren't before, it feels like someone was posting a while ago, like the prices of stuff in some of the nomad hubs, which used to be like affordable and is no longer the case anymore. So my kind of sense is like it's changed and like certain places are lower and certain places are higher. But even just from personal experience, went to Mexico City a while ago and like walking some areas that when we were there in 2017, you'd be like, there's like a few international folks around, and then it's like English all over the place. So it feels like places like that, Mexico City, places that have been open, have really kind of even gotten to higher levels than they were before.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like we have friends who have been pretty much as soon as like, borders were opening and restrictions were basically once it was like, okay, it's kind of deemed like okay to travel again. We had lots of friends that kind of, took off who had been kind of staying put in wherever basically they had been when the pandemic hit. And so we do have lots of friends who are traveling again full time. But then there's other people I think that we know like us who maybe took that opportunity to go settle somewhere or get a house somewhere, or maybe go back to the US for a period of time. So I think it's kind of all over the place but yeah, it seems like lots of people are traveling and going remote and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I love to see it, and it's kind of cool what places have evolved and expanded because of that. And I think a lot of new places are being discovered as well because of the shift as well. So pretty cool to see.
Yeah, yeah, and definitely an evolution as like it starts to get more popular. So many people now have the freedom to do it, and how that's going to evolve over time will be interesting. One thing I'd
Cool.
really love to dive into, Neel, would be the Africa trip. And I know you kind of outlined like the general details of it, but I know that's a place like when you look on like the nomad radar, South Africa, like a tiny bit, but really like a gigantic continent that not many nomads are going to. Can you kind of talk to us like what brought you to Africa, where you went, what some of the highlights of that trip were?
Yeah, absolutely. So, by the way, Africa is freaking awesome. Like I loved it. I kind of wish I went early. I was actually speaking with my girlfriend of whether if we went early in our travel career, would we have appreciated it more or less? I think after you've traveled a while and you've seen a lot of places, it is refreshing to go to Africa because it's so different, right? It's not Europe. It's not even Latin America. Like it's just kind of a different beast in its own. And the way people are, the way the environment is, you just learn a lot very, very quickly. So I loved it. It was just kind of a lot of stimuli going immediately. So I went there originally just because we were going to go on a 3-month trip and wanted to go somewhere unique. So we decided on East Africa. And I had a buddy who ran a tour company in Tanzania. So we decided to go start in Tanzania, do a safari over there, and kind of go from there. And there's so many adventures you could get into in Africa. So I got connected to be able to go stay with one of the last hunter-gatherer tribes in Africa for 24 hours. So things like that, where I stayed with them, we went on a hunt together, which is, sounds crazy, but it was just so cool. Went on a motorcycle trip, and then you get to stop in villages, talk with different local people. It's just the types of adventures you could get into in Africa are very different, and the people are incredible. They don't see as many tourists in most places. It's also kind of untapped. Like I'd be on the motorcycle and I'd stop at a village on the side and like crowd of people would come around, look at the bike, come up to me. I'd hand out candy to the kids and they'd love it. They'd go crazy. So it's just kind of a neat feeling of going somewhere which is a little bit more untapped as an international tourist going over there and just being able to explore a lot of what is offered. So I think it was a lot of the reasons of going there were just kind of novelty, trying to see somewhere new. And actually, like the Wi-Fi is pretty good. Depends where you're staying, but enough for me to be able to work. It's on the same time zone as Europe for the most part, so it wasn't too bad. So definitely would recommend it now. I'm assuming 5, 10 years ago, the infrastructure might have been a little bit different, but right now, a lot of cities are pretty tech forward.
Yeah, that's really awesome to hear. That's definitely on our list for some time in the next couple of years. And I'm curious for you at this point in your career, when you do go on these bigger trips, do you do something like you scale back your work for like the 3 months that you're traveling and kind of focus on the travels? Do you just keep working like, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 type thing? How does it kind of look now when you're doing those travels?
So time zones are a big thing for me because I work on US Standard Time. So we have our franchisees and I'll do coaching calls with them and helping them out. That will usually happen within US working hours. So what happens when I'm in a place like Africa, I have the whole day to myself and then the nighttime at work. So what the schedule would be like in the morning, get up, let's say 9 to 5. I'll do a little bit of work, go do some cool activities, come back at 5 p.m. It's now 8 a.m. in Los Angeles, where I could start doing meetings, connecting with the team. So there is a little bit of work which does get dropped off, right? It's mostly a lot of stuff. A lot of weeks might be in more maintenance mode, making sure the franchisees are taken care of, make sure I'm meeting with my management team, things like that. And then there's other times where if I'm in a city for a couple weeks at a time, I could start to dive into real work because I could do that before everyone wakes up. I don't have any activities or anything I'm doing. So many times I actually get way more work done than I would in Los Angeles. So I think the time zone changes actually help me out quite a bit to be able to accomplish both.
Yeah, that's cool to hear. So thanks for sharing that. And yeah, as challenging as time zones can be when you don't have the like exact work day that I guess is kind of expected or typical, I feel like it is nice to kind of recreate your schedule in a different way. Like I know when we were nomading in Asia, the first kind of year we did it, it was nice because we basically had like the whole day where nobody was trying to get a hold of us. And so we could get up early, do a couple hours of work, come back kind of after dinner. And it's like, people in Canada, US would be online again. And so we could basically schedule calls like early morning and in the evenings and at night. And we had the whole day free without anyone bothering us and nobody being like, oh, you're off like hanging out with elephants today. Like just you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, like no, I did it a few hours ago. Now I'm working. It's fine.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Pros and cons, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like I often, when we're interviewing people, go on Time Zone Buddy to be like, hey, how could I work if we were just doing it with like Budapest and Georgia and like Asia? Or like, how could I work from here if I was trying to figure this out?
Right. Yeah. Some places like Asia's tough for me because it's like a 14-hour difference from Los Angeles. I'd have like a couple hours at night spending with my team, and then it's 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. and you go to sleep right after work. You don't really get to wind down either. So I remember thinking like Asia's really tough. I don't think I would go to Asia for an extended period just because the time zones would be tough for me. But I think it depends what industry you're in, right? If time zones matter a lot or they don't matter at all, that'll dictate where you get to go.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Yeah. And then I know for us, like typically we have sometimes more calls at night. And so getting into like Eastern Europe where those calls become like really early in the morning becomes like the hardest part. Whereas Asia, it's like, oh, you get so far ahead that you can do them in the morning over there. So it really depends on, the type of work you're doing, that type of this, the setup you have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so for you, Neel, as you kind of look ahead, you just finished a big trip back in the States now. What does kind of the next while look like in terms of your travel plans?
Definitely have a home base in Los Angeles, continuing to build MaidThis franchise. And so working on that. So that's one thing, which is also remote, kind of do it from wherever. So planning smaller trips here and there, going to Mexico, planning to, I do want to head back to Africa at some point, probably early 2023 to West Africa. So check that out. But definitely going to always have, I think, for now, a home base to go back to and just make trips from there. That seems a little bit more aligned with what I want to do and a little bit more comfortable for me now as well. So that'll be the next move.
Nice. That's awesome. And then in terms of business, is the focus right now mostly on growing the franchise?
Yeah, exactly. So we have 7 locations right now. The locations we have, all the people are people who are pretty much trying to escape the rat race and have a nomadic lifestyle. So helping them pretty much build the model I had and MaidThis into their own market, use the blueprint systems, coaching, everything that we have, and just let them expand. So the goal is to get to around 20 to 30 franchise locations and kind of cap it over there. So just kind of on the hunt for people around the US who fit that mold.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, this has been really, really awesome conversation. We've loved getting to chat with you today. I'm curious if people are interested in learning more about you, learning more about MaidThis, where can they go to find all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you could go to maidthisfranchise.com, MaidThis franchise.com if you're interested or just to connect with me. Probably most active on Twitter, Neel B. Parekh. So feel free to message me or DM me on there as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time today, Neel. This has been really fun.
Thanks, Neel.
Thanks for having me, guys. That was fun.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you want more, make sure to check out The World Wanders Insider, available on Patreon at patreon.com/theworldwanderers.
For show notes, head over to theworldwanderers.com. Find us on social media at The World Wanderers Podcast and join the private Facebook community at World Wanderers, a community for travelers.
You can always get in touch with us at info@theworldwanderers.com. And if you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps us find new listeners.
See you next time.